good morning, and this is the Introduction to Microsoft Excel, Session 3, Basic Formulas and Shortcuts. My name is Michael Levy with the Summit, and today I'm going to show you a little bit more about Excel. Now that we're in our Session 3, you've now gotten to see how we've built up on the foundations of Microsoft Excel, from learning the spreadsheet to understanding what the different options are in the menu. And today we're going to go into more formulas and shortcuts. Hope you're excited. Let's get going here. To begin, just a few housekeeping procedures. For Zoom etiquette, for everyone to hear, make sure you stay muted. This presentation will be recorded for training purposes and for future use to the public. Please jot down your questions and we will go over these at the conclusion of the training. Once we do get to the Q&A, that is the conclusion of the training. Okay, an overview of today's session. We're going to share 5 ways on how to enter formulas. We're also going to go over briefly those handy formulas and the shortcuts. These are some very critical pieces of Excel that you can use in your everyday living as well as in your business life as well. These are very, very great things that I think you're going to take away a lot, in this session. And then we're going to look at the basic math functions that you can use through Excel. We do have a few of these that are real common that I think that you will enjoy using in your daily task with spreadsheets. So I think you'll enjoy those. But that'll be the overview of today, and let's go ahead and get started. The 5 ways to enter formulas. We're going to go over these and let you see a little bit how they all work together. So number 1, we also, when we talk about formulas, they all have a different way of being able to be used in Excel. So we look at number 1, you can manually enter Excel formulas, sometimes by a long list, which if you remember back to our first session, we talked about ranges, and the range of cells is a group of cells. Well, this case, we're looking at long lists are kind of a group of cells here. And we'll talk a little bit more about the sum function in a little bit. But to begin, the sum function is being used here to add up all of the cells in that range, that B4 through B13. And I'm going to get my little annotation tool here where I can draw a little bit, because right here, this right here is important. When it comes to long lists, that is a range, and you can use that as where you want to sum up a group of numbers, and that again will sum everything up and give you a total. Now we can also look at short lists as well, and again we can then look at the short list where you can have a couple of groups of different things and sum up the numbers. And say, for instance, here you got the sum right here of these particular cells, B4, B5, B6, and B7. Or you can also do it another way, the same kind of principle. This time you can do it by the plus sign. You can do it by sum, B4, B5, B6, B7. So again, you can place the cursor in the first empty cell at the bottom of your list, and we'll have a visual in just a minute, or any cell really, and press that plus sign, because you can then click on each of these individual cells and then allow yourself to get a total of those cells. Again, there's multiple ways to do the sum feature in Excel. This gives you kind of an idea here. And again, these will add up the list, and then they'll be pointed to these particular cells that give you that final answer. Again, so you can enter these manually in Excel. So that's one way you can do that. Let me go ahead and get off of this for a second. So we got that. So again, that's how you can do the one portion of the summing of all these numbers. The second way is also through the insert function. Now you will see also at the top of Excel, there is one way you go into and I brought a little breakdown here for you, the formulas tab here. These have, again, a lot more of the math functions like you were talking about. And they also have some automation to it. But in this case, the insert function you see right here in this first piece, and that part right there will then allow you to insert, in particular, stuff under the formulas tab. Now, again, like I say, let me go back here real quick and annotate real quick. So again, yeah, this right here, the insert function is very, very important to know. So again, when you use the insert function, that button is under the formulas tab, and you can select that from that menu list. And then again, here's a couple of things that kind of stuck out in the insert function. You have one that is the count, where you get a full count of numbers in a range. And again, when you look at this here, B4 to B13, this counts the numbers in a range. It ignores any kind of blank or empty cells as well in this. So that's one way. Now, you're talking more about numbers here, okay? The numbers, when you do a count, in this case, we're talking numbers. Now, we also have another one that's count A. Now, you see right here, you added in a letter A. Then again, this counts all the characters in a range. And again, it also ignores any blank or empty cells as well. So the insert function does have a few ways, and there's much more there as well, but this is one way that you can get a count of a certain amount of things in a range as well. So again, count by the numbers, and then count A for the characters in a range. All right. So now let's look at the third way. And let me get back in here. And there we go. So before we get to the third way, here's a little visual for you. And now we can, when you hit that insert function tab, that button on there, you're going to get this little box. And you have a choice, and you can select which one you want. In this case here, we're talking about a group of cells, the range. And this right here gives you a perfect example of how to do that. And then, like, again, you have this little box here. And let me get off of that. But you can do that where you have this box. And this has a group of numbers that you want to get the final total for. Okay, so looking at this, you have the sum, and you can actually, when you select sum, it's going to give you this little box. You can then put the first group of numbers that you want to sum up. And that right here, B14, you remember B and 4, I'm sorry, B4 and not B14, B4, which is blueberries, which is 88, and we're looking at all the way down to gooseberries, which is B13. So again, B4 to B13 is what we're looking at to sum up the numbers. And where, again, these arrows, just to kind of show you what it is, when you use the insert function, this is what it's going to look like in the formula. That's what's going to add up all of these numbers and give you a total. Okay, so that gives you a little piece of the visual of how that all works. But yeah, summary of this, you're basically summing up the numbers of B4, which is 88, all the way down to gooseberries, which is 34, and that's going to give you the final total in that case. Just to give you a visual on that portion. But on number 3, we also have selecting a function from this group. And what we're talking about in this group, and you remember group is a bunch of these different buttons inside the tab. So in this ribbon here. So again, we're looking at, again, anything in here, the Autosum, recently used, the financial, you get what I'm saying. All of these different things inside here, those are all a part of the group. And you can choose from any of these to give yourself, to also do some more different type of formulas or shortcuts. So you can choose one from there as well. One thing I do want to highlight, though, in number 4 is that the recently used. Now, this is a common one for things that you commonly use on a regular basis in Excel. A lot of these will be saved in here, and these are ones that you can use. And when you do click the recently unused button, it does show you the functions you've recently done. So again, that makes sense, right? Recently used, the different types of functions that you've already done. And again, it saves you time. It also helps you when you're dealing really with a big amount of spreadsheet numbers. Then this can help you kind of go back and get that kind of formula done really quickly. Like, for instance, I hear the average. We were looking at B4 and B13, right? So the average of this, you could take that same list again, going back here. You can take that same list that you see in here, and you can actually get the average of this as well. It kind of gives you an example here. This kind of gives you this is a little bit older version of Excel, but again, same principle. You can look at the average here, and you can see that when you do put the equals average, and this is they're in C4 to C13 in this example, it's same principle. Think of it as the numbers in this group here, okay? So again, you have, and then if you're wanting the inventory, the average number out of that inventory, you use this equal average, C4 to C13. Again, so there's C is the 88 right here. And then you've also got that C4, which is blueberries. And then you've got gooseberries all the way down to C13, which is 34. Now, why is that 60? Because that's the average of all of these together. So you would, again, take the average of this. You could do, and this is another short form, another formula that you can use instead. There's other ways you can do it too. But this is probably one of the quicker ones and one you'll see in that recently used menu. But just to kind of give you the shout out on that, that's where all that comes in. So again, recently used, you can use that average part. Again, that divides, it adds the list and then divides by the number of values inside there. So if there was 6 numbers, you'll divide by 6. So average number, you'll add up the list and divide by how many numbers are there, just like you would in just a regular basic math problem. It would be add them up and divide by how many you got. And that right there will provide you the average. And then you've got the 5th one, which is the auto function. When you have auto functions, then they're called Autosum. And like I showed you, there's a list of different menu choices in here on some of the common ones. Summary we've just talked about, just summing up the numbers. And then you got average, which you take the numbers, add them up, and divide by how many there are. And then you can do a full count of how many numbers are in that group, in that range or whatever. So again, these are some of the things that you'll see in Autosum. The summarizing and just adding them up, that's kind of the default one, but they put all of these together and you can get that. But you can, again, using that recently used button, you can do that and it will save you time. And then you can use Autosum as well for some of those other type ones that are pretty common, like average, and then you can also subtract ones too. We'll have another little chart a little later just to show you exactly what some of these functions do, and they'll give you a little bit of a formula to look at. But again, that's the 5th way, is using the Autosum. And again, it's a very common one that you can use in Excel. And it's also pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. So I just want you to see, you can have all these different, in the groups, you have different ones that you can use all together. But like I said, when we look back at that average, this is kind of what you were looking at. Again, this is just one example, and you can do the numbers in here. And then you also have the max and min. You can also, if you wanted to look at a group of numbers too, like the max and min are another one. You can see, you can get the total of you can get the highlight this group of cells and find out what is the highest number in there. And in this case, at the last number, the highest number in this E category, looking at letter E, like basically E4 all the way to E13. Now, we have the number in here, looks like the highest number is 90. Okay, so that's your max. So again, that's where you can do a max number and see what your highest number in that group of cells are. And then the same on the opposite side, the min. You can also see what the smallest number is. So like looking at column F right here. You can also then, let me get my drawing tool again, I'm sorry. Again, you can also, if you look at this, you can look at the inventory here in column F, row number 4, which is 88. And you can also go all the way down to the row 13, which you see 34. Now the minimum in here, same principle. Out of that group of cells, it looks like the last one, gooseberries, is 34. So that's your minimum. You can actually get a count like that. So those are some ways you can kind of look at that. And then you have just a count numbers as well. You can then go ahead and get equals count B4 to B13. You can get a count of how many different things there are here. And again, you can see here you have 1 blueberries, 2 raspberries, 3 strawberries, 4 blackberries, 5 huckleberries, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And that's where your 10 comes in. It can give you a count of how many different things are in that range. And then you can get just a general count of how many there are. So now you're seeing a little bit of the different functions this can do. It's real powerful. I've said from the beginning in lesson 1, Excel's very powerful. You can do several different things in the spreadsheet, and you can do it in multiple ways. That's why you have spreadsheet in different columns and rows to allow yourself to do that. It gives you that ability to do different elements all across the spreadsheet and give you a snapshot of what you're doing. And again, the accountants, this is one of their favorite things. They can get a total of, as far as how much is in budgets, they can use that as how much has been spent in this category. What's the average amount spent, in this area? And then what year have we spent the least amount versus the highest amount? So you can see how the spreadsheets can be used. They use it as a forecasting ability to be able to project things down the road. And that's one thing that's really nice about these. You can get a count of some of these things. You can get the averages. You can just sum up or take the difference. You use them all across there, but these are just a few of those elements. There's so many other videos out there that tell you a little bit about all of these functions. I highly recommend to keep doing. This is just a snapshot. This will allow you to at least get some of the basics along the way, which is, again, this is the introductory portion of Excel. There's so much more beyond this, but to focusing right now, this is what you got to look at. Take these little rows and these columns, and then you can basically do these different headings, whether it's an average, a count, or you try to find out how many things are in these rows and columns. You can get a count on those too. So you're getting to see kind of the big picture of all this. But remember, you can do some of these basic functions all along the way in Excel. Let me go back here and get back onto the presentation. Now look at this way. We also, just to give you a little bit more insight on Autosum. Now Autosum, again, you can get the max number. Like you say, we talked a little bit about that max and min. You can highlight a group of cells, and then you can get the highest value that's in that list. And then you have the minimum, which you can return that lowest value. You can see all of those as part of Autosum. And then you can use that Autosum for basic formulas like we saw for the addition and getting the total of all of the numbers there. An average number by adding all the numbers and dividing by how many are there. And then just a solid count like you're seeing here, the max and min. Finding out, how many elements are there, which one's the highest, which one's the lowest. So again, Autosum is a very, very key button that you can use to get some of these simple formulas out. All right, so we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to get some more handy formulas and more shortcuts. Again, take some notes on these, and there's way more than what I'm sharing here. This is just the basics, but you also know that you start a foundation and then you keep building on it. And that's why I want to showcase today is that you have some basic formulas that you can use in these spreadsheets. And not every project is very intense. You can do simple stuff in your daily life. And like I said, grocery lists, you can see how many, if you wanted to create a grocery list and know how many of a certain, like canned soup, or how many things of produce you're getting, you can get totals like that as well. You can create headings with all of these different elements, and you can sum them up like we saw. And then you can get at like how often you're buying them. You can create yourself a little list and help you keep within your budget. So these formulas and shortcuts can help you in that. Now, one of the ones I want to share with you a little bit is about these handy formulas and shortcuts. There's one on days. Okay, you can use the days formula and shortcut to, again, calculate the number of days between two dates. So there's no worries about how many days are in each month of the range. So you look for this example here. We have the end date October 12th, 2015. And we want to know how many days are in between March 31st of 2015. Okay, so again, you're doing subtraction on this. So you want to know how many days are in between these two dates. And again, here's the formula how to do that. You can do, again, equals days. All right, so you already have your days set in this one thing. And then you could take it and say equals days. And then, now I know we don't have necessarily a spreadsheet in front here, but you can look at it as this. Think of October 12th as if you want to look at that as the A30, okay? And then you look at the start date, March 31st, 2015, okay? And that's going to be your A29. So you're wanting to know these two cells, how many of the days are in between this. So again, looking at the fall going all the way back to the spring of 2015. If we do equals days, A30, which is October 12th, through comma A29, we want these two cells in that we want to know how many days. Then you're going to get the number 195. There's 195 days in between October 12th, 2015, and the start date of March 31st, 2015. So that's days. That's one way. That's a nice little formula that you can use to get the count of how many days are in between two dates. Then we've also got number 2 is trim. Again, trim is a lifesaver if you're always importing and pasting stuff into Excel, such as like a database, a website, word processing software, and even other text programs like Notepad. You can, again, so often these imported texts are filled with lots of spaces. Again, Excel is unique in that way. You can't copy directly from like another Word document to Excel. They are different programs. And if you do, they're probably gonna get some weird kind of stuff like different text and some kind of code looking stuff. And obviously that's what's kind of weird. But you do have a function here where if you do copy, for instance, from one Excel thing to another, you sometimes will have extra spaces, okay? That trim function actually removes those extra spaces in seconds. And in this case, just once you do enter that formula in, you can then copy it to the end of the list. So for example, you can, again, if you wanted to look at, and I think I've got an example here, Yeah, here we go. So I wanted you to look at this little example that I have here. And again, this is just a sample. If you want, and again, we kind of have, I also kind of overview the days thing too. So now this gives, there's that visual that I was trying to show you before, A29, A30. So again, like I say, we have the October 12th right here, and then the March 31st, and then there's a number 195 days in between those. And here's that formula that you see right there. And that formula again will again be, that's what we were talking about just a little bit ago, equals days A30, which is October 12th, comma A29, which is March 31st. That allows you to then see the amount of days that are in between. Okay, so there it is, 195 there. All right, same thing on here. We're going to not talk really about network days. That's more of just during the day, Monday through Friday type thing. So that's another way, but you can do the same thing as well and kind of exclude the weekends. So that's another way. Work days is kind of what we're focusing on that one. Okay. But then you look at this way. Now, for instance, we talked about trim, and we were saying that we were copying things from one spreadsheet to another, and sometimes there's extra spaces that are in there. Now, the trim feature does allow us to then have you could actually take, for instance, you're looking at A39 here. So then A39 is going to be right here with yellow. Okay, so I'm going to kind of highlight right here. So there's yellow scars. Okay, A39. And we want to trim equals the trim amount here. You can then see here that, and I think what I got here, let's see, it's kind of a little interesting, but then this actually, we kind of want to look at the blue hat one actually. So I don't know why it had A39 there, but you can look at trim though and see how you have extra spaces in here. Okay, now this example here, we talked about the blue hats. Now you see here that there looks like a lot of space right in here, okay? And then you look at right here, and the space is a little bit less. That's what trim does. It actually will help you take a cell, and you can actually group of cells if you wanted to, and use all of those and make and fix the spacing in it. And you can see where the spaces were removed in here. So if you do that, and then you can actually take these and make them smaller. So that's what trim does. Is you can take things that have a little extra space in them and then make it and consolidate them into one space. So trim is another very, very easy feature that you can use in there. So yeah, like I said, that's trim. And then we talked about the average. So yeah, again, here's an example. Oh, and let me clear my clear my annotation real quick here so we can see. Okay, so now we look at average. Now, this is a very common one that we use in Excel. And a little example here, we kind of looked at that just a little bit earlier, but this is another example that you can see. So now we have in here, and they're talking about using, they're using that actual E2 through E6, okay? So again, averages are used every day to determine the median or midpoint of a set of numbers, okay? For example, the average grades for a group of students, average temperature of a region, and even the average height of sixth graders. Before functions you get an average, you need to add the column of numbers, okay? So you see right here, and I like this annotation thing because I can then go back here and give you an actual look at this. So now we have this group of numbers right here, okay? And again, you would add the column of numbers, for example, 10 numbers. We're going to have 6 in this case, or sorry, we have 5 actually, I'm sorry. And then you're going to divide, you got to add those numbers and divide by 5. This average function does that for you. You can use this formula to do all of this. So typing in the word equals average, E2 to E6, remember the range here, we're looking at E2 right here, all the way to E6. So again, 45, 24, 84, 26, and 41. That's your range right there, E2 to E6. That's what it's talking about. So typing into average equals average E2 to E6, adds those 5 numbers and then divides by 6. Now, and it's when you add these 5 numbers here, you also divide by 5 in this case because there's only 5 numbers. That gives you the average between that. In this case, and when you look at E8 right here, that's your average. And that's what we're highlighted right here. This shows you exactly what we're doing. We're getting the average. You see this right here? So equals average E2 to E6. And that's what's represented in E8 right here, 44. That's the average of the 5 numbers that are showing right here. So again, that's your average. That equals average E2 to E6, and you get that result of 44 right here in E8. Good so far? I hope so. Go back and watch this if you have any questions about it. But again, this is where you come in and you can put a group of numbers together. And if you want to know what the range and the average number is out of all that, this is what you can do with a very short formula. So again, number 3 was average. Then you also have Autosum. Like I say, here's another visual for you using the Autosum feature. And again, Autosum, it automatically adds a quick calculation to your worksheet, such as a sum or an average. In this case, we're looking at sum. So when you click the Autosum, and let me get that little squiggle off of here. There we go. So again, we have these numbers here, we're adding them up. And like you see here, and again, when you use Autosum, it automatically enters a formula inside this. Like we highlighted that when we had Autosum, we highlighted this group of cells. And that you see right here, E7 is blank. That's okay. You can we're just doing all of the ones that have numbers right now. And again, that does the sum function. And then you also see, we also have a little example. We won't worry about that right now. But looking at here on the example, we highlighted the numbers here from E2 to E6. And then in E8 right now, we're trying to find out what that summary of those numbers are. What is the total number? That's what Autosum is doing. All right. So now, like I mentioned to you, we also have some big formulas too. You're looking on, these are some other basic ones. Now, we've already looked at the sum feature. Now you're looking a little bit at some of these other ones, like subtracting numbers. You were probably wondering, well, why are we so focused on the addition numbers? Can't we subtract too? Absolutely. You can absolutely do the opposite as well. These are just a few other things you can see. And this is kind of redundant. We have done a little bit of these already, but these are also a couple new ones that you may have not seen. And subtracting numbers, again, we can do the same thing by taking 2 cells. We could say equals A2, and we want to get the difference between A2 and A3. So A2 minus A3. So again, that subtracts the values in A2 from A3. Here's another one about the sum. You can do it again, we can do a range of actual cells here, equals sum A2 to A4. So it adds all the numbers in the list and includes the negative numbers as well. So if you have negative numbers, it's going to alter that as well. So keep that in mind. And then you can also multiply stuff. You can actually take 2 cells and multiply them. So A2 times A3. And again, that multiplies those numbers in 2 cells. And product is also the same, it's also multiplying. And remember, because you have summary, difference, you can also use product as multiplying and divide. So all of those can be used here too. In this case, product ranges from A2 to A4. You can multiply all of those numbers to get that answer. And then the same thing you can actually do also here. This is another one that's kind of unique. Equals product ranges A2 to A4 with a 2. And what that means is that when you multiply all these numbers from A2 to A4, and then you multiply that result by 2. And that's where the comma is, because we have another cell that may be 2. So you're multiplying that result by 2. So just to kind of keep you some other basic formulas you can use inside Excel as well. All right, let's move on to the next one here. We also talk about division. So dividing numbers, the front word slash actually is used for division. So you can use in here equals A2 divided by A3, dividing the value in A2 by the value in A3. And then you can also, like we talked about counting, you can also do min and max, small and large. You have in here the minimum values. Now, in this group of cells, A2 to A7, we want to know what the minimum number is. What's the smallest number in that specific range? Same thing with max. We're doing the range of A2 to A7. We want to know the largest number in that specific range. You can do small and large. So again, this one here, the range is A2 to A7. But then when you calculate that small number, you also have the 2. In the large one, it also calculates the third largest number in a specific range. So you see here A2 to A7, we want the third largest number. So again, there's some things in here that you can get some small answers just out of these little formulas. So there's more great details that you can have here. And then we're not going to go into a whole lot of detail on this. I just wanted to show you in these examples of what other kind of things it can do. You can also do conversions as well. You could use formulas to convert things. Like, for instance, if you want to make things you convert all of your stuff was already uppercase and you want to make it lowercase, you can actually tell that cell like equal all lowercase in A1. So again, that will convert the uppercase text into lowercase. That's just, again, you can take a whole cell and change it to something else. Again, you can see all of these. You can do days, hours, months, and days. I mean, all of these, the hours and minutes, even degrees, even Celsius to Fahrenheit, gallons to liters. I mean, I mean, it's just, there's a lot of different options in here. Centimeters to inches, you name it. I mean, there's nothing that Excel can't handle. It really is, it's amazing. But these are just some of the other ones that you can do conversion formulas to. And you don't use them all the time, but they're all there. I mean, the program will do it if you have the formula you want to use for it. Again, just some more shortcuts in there. One of the other things too, when some of these other shortcuts you got just working with some of these different cells, I just put a few of these in here that they may help you sometimes even with formatting, even just kind of filling in stuff. So you look at in here the Shift and F8. You can and say we have a Windows version and we have a Macintosh version. So an Apple. So you can, again, you have both sides of it depending on what operating system you're using. You can then have these other different shortcuts to help you. So like Shift F8, and it helps you enable to add a non-adjacent cell, or range to a selection of cells. So you can actually take more data, and you can allows you to highlight other things in other cells. The Control Shift F, and again, I'm on Windows, so I'm just using some of the Windows ones, but same principle with Mac. You can also use this shortcut to open the format cells. Now this is also a really nice one too, because in certain cells you want to either align stuff differently. You also want to present it in a different way than what it defaults to, and that's another way you can look at this. So again, Control Shift F allows you to open the format cells for an actual box, and then Control Shift plus equals, and then so again Control Shift equals again displays insert dialog box for adding rows and cells. And you can go through the rest of these. These are some of the ones that are pretty common that you can use in Excel. If you use them all the time, this is a very nice feature to have. So these are just a few other ones. You can find all of these as well on the internet in any of the Excel training series that you want to look at even more in depth. They're all there for you. But these are just a few. And then also, again, just a few more right here. Like, you can look at it like Control Shift U. It all switches between expanding and collapsing the formula bar. So you can take some of that stuff off there if you don't want. Shift F9 calculates the active worksheet. F9 calculates all open worksheets. And then you also have alternate equals, Autosum selected cells. So like I say, these are just some other options you have for it. And then again, the counting, we were talking about the counting formulas. These are just, again, another few examples, and like we just talked about, and some even more expanded than we just did say. So you can take a range of cells, you can count, and again, count the number of non-blank cells in a range. You can also, remember, count A in this case right here. That's different. We're talking about characters, not actually numbers. So count A is dealing with characters. So it could be letters and stuff too. Oh, sorry. And then then you can also use count A for the range of cells in A6. And like in this case, you count the number of non-blank cells in that top two, okay? And then the bottom cells in a range. Again, there are more of these in there. You don't use these all the time, but you can kind of get the idea by some of these different examples, in counting formulas. We're now at the summary. We've had a lot of information today. Again, to recap, we shared 5 ways to enter formulas. Again, you can do them manually inside the system. You can also then go in and use the insert function, and you could type in, you could do the sum of numbers, or you can also look at, again, using Autosum or the recently used. We talked about all those earlier today. And again, you can go back and see, let me go back here to where we had those different examples. As you see here, we had the insert function. We also have Autosum, the recently used. You also have some of these other ones that like date and time. That's also a really nice one to use. And then they have more, there's so many of them, but these are just some of the highlights. And any of these they open up and do more things. So again, those are some of the ways that you can use a lot of these formulas. So again, and there we also showcase those handy formulas and shortcuts. We took some of those things that we did, in the early examples, and we added to it. You can do so many different things by just counting or averaging or just taking the difference between things. Again, there's formulas for just about everything in Excel. There's so many ways to do multiple things. And then the last part we did was the dissecting of some of those basic math functions. We looked back in here and we looked at, looking at some of the, when it comes down to this here, when we did sum, we did averages, some of your basic stuff here. You can subtract numbers too. All of those, you use some of these basic math functions and just about everything in Excel. How many you use is up to you, but it also helps to when you're making a big spreadsheet and you already have these in place, then it saves you time. So again, and sometimes these things can get very daunting, and it's really important that you do use a lot of these actual formulas and shortcuts to reduce the time to working on spreadsheets. Again, we talked about a lot today, but these are really the big things that we went over. So now I'll take your questions and comments. Again, you can use the chat feature and submit your questions. And if you have any other questions and like to stick around, you're more to do so. But this is the conclusion of the training. If you have no further questions, thank you so much for attending and have a great day.